Hey, this is DHD doing my review of Resident Evil 6. How bad is it? Now, all things told, doing this review chaps my ass a little bit because I had, let's just say, a very differing opinion from most of the reviewers at the time that were out when this game released. But, taking nostalgia and what my expectations of the game were at that time versus how I feel about it now, get a much more accurate picture as to where this game actually stands. And all things considered, the good and the bad, I would still place this in average territory. Although I can personally, and I could see a lot of people putting this in the much lower categories like bad or just terrible for some. But I mean, these reviews are nothing but people's opinions, and this is mine, and I can back it up. So I'm going to be doing the same review style that I do for each of mine. And the first thing is graphics. I'm going to keep most of this on still frame back here just because I didn't mute these videos. And I'm going to bring them up to make certain points as need be. But the graphics in Resident Evil 6 it's kind of a mixed bag. Some things look very bad, which is pretty normal for the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3, given their low amount of VRAM. A lot of the textures in the game, like specifically the guns and things that you might not really be focusing on, just look horrible. Other things look great, such as the lighting. I thought the shadowing looked pretty good. The character models it depends on which one you're looking at. Some of them can be good, but some can be bad. Overall, I thought it was, if you're playing it on the older consoles, then you would notice it being a step up from Resident Evil 5. But if you're playing it on PC, it's a step down. I don't know how that works. That's just how it is. So graphics in this game I would say they were a little above average for the time. Controls. The controls are easy to pick up and play. There's a little bit of learning to get involved. The learning curve's not extremely steep, but it is there. The cover system takes a little bit of getting used to just because it's all contextual based and it's all done with the left trigger. Other than that, you should have really no problem picking it up once you start playing through it. And once you get through a campaign, you should have it down pretty good here. And the campaigns have a lot of replayability. I'll get into all this. My opinion section on this game is going to be huge. Gameplay. I could sum it up like this. Watch a cutscene, shoot some dudes, and then play some mini games. Jumble up that order and do it again. That's pretty much it. It works pretty well though. Some people could be irritated by the mini games. I'm not a big fan of mini games, but they didn't really bother me that much. Although I'm going to be getting into my opinions territory here. They could have swapped them in for other things like the big boss fights and all that. They could have kept the mini games out of that easily. Sound. The sound's pretty good. I have to say it ranges from good to very bad. Some of the things like the explosions, gunshots, most of the voice acting spot on. The explosions, sound pretty good, stuff like that. It gets you into the game. Where it's bad is, I don't know who Ada Wong's voice actor is for this game, but she's horrible. She's just kind of, talks real low all the time, real low energy. Half the time you can't even hear what she's saying. So there's that. And then there's the overly repetitive voiceovers and the same voice lines coming over and over again when you get into the China levels. I hated the China levels. And that was a big part of Chris's campaign, which is why I hated his the most. That's one of them. Music. Certainly not one of the strong points of this game. In fact, I thought it was horrible. For every good tune I heard, which is far and few between, there's about 100 I hated. I thought the music in this game sucked, period. It just was not good. Story, way too ambitious for its own good. You're going to hear me say this a lot. It's kind of like they put their junior writing crew on this game. And they thought, let's just make this big global conspiracy instead of from like the small localized events that Resident Evil is known for, dealing with Raccoon City or the mansion incident in the first one. I didn't play Code Veronica, so I'm not going to opine on that, but Resident Evil 4 was a little larger in scale. Resident Evil 5 was just kind of like 4. In fact, it was a carbon copy. But Resident Evil 6 was just like, well, let's do multiple campaigns and let's just open up this big story that interweaves each individual character through the other campaigns and intersection events. And the story became, let's just say, nonsensical at best. I'm glad that Resident Evil 7 and Resident Evil 8 dropped this like a hot potato, because I'm kind of curious where they could even go from here, that this story in this game opened up such a big bag of worms. They would probably have to do like what Deus Ex did after Invisible War, since that left it so wide open. They just went back to going small, and that's what the game's good at. If you're going to have a storyline like this game, you'd have to put it in a big RPG series like Mass Effect or something like that. And Resident Evil, it simply doesn't fit. I'm not saying it couldn't be done with the right writers, but they didn't pull it off here. So the story was bad, but I mean, it kind of fits the cheesy, campy action movie / horror thing that they were going for. So I can't read their minds, but maybe that's what they intended. Stability and bugs. I played this game a lot on the 360. I played through it for a little bit on PlayStation 3, and I played through it a little bit on the PC. I don't think I ever encountered a bug. Basically a stability issue bug, anything that could stop your gameplay from going forward, or corrupted save files, things like that. So it's a very stable game. Opinions. Okay, here's where I lay out all the game's strong points and a lot of the weakness. To say this title was overly ambitious would be taking it lightly. This game is kind of like the complete opposite of what Resident Evil 5 set out to do. Resident Evil 5 took it very safe. They just went by the template set by Resident Evil 4 and just expanded on a little bit and then added co-op, because that's what everyone was doing at the time, and you gotta follow trends. So Resident Evil 6 thought, okay, we're already going in a shooter-oriented direction, and Resident Evil's kind of far from its roots at this point anyway. Let's not just blow the whole thing the hell up and go for this big global conspiracy where you have multiple campaigns, multiple conflicts in different points of the earth that go from here to here to here. You have intersection points between like Chris's campaign and Leon's campaign, or Sherry's campaign and Ada's campaign, and you can get players intersecting. If someone happens to be in that specific part of the campaign and you happen to be in that specific spot of the campaign, it was a cool idea to have them intersect and you could play in each other's games, but they only give you 60 seconds to try to find a match with other people. And chances of what I just stated was slim to begin with. And they don't give you the option of extending that timer any longer. It's just 60 seconds. If you don't get it, then you get to play with some AI. Which, given how some players play in random matches and all that, it couldn't really be, I mean, it could be a good thing playing with AI, but they're generally unresponsive. The AI is not that good in this game. I mean, it was a cool idea. It was just executed very poorly. And here, I'd have to say, as far as the action shooter direction that they went, that worked out very well. It became a very fun, compelling game to play, especially if you had someone to play it with in co-op. Like, I played this with my cousin when it first came out. We played through Leon's campaign, and we had a blast playing through it, mini games and all, and I felt that was the way you were supposed to play through this game. If you're playing through it solo, you're probably not going to enjoy it. So they excelled at having a fun multiplayer game here, and with the additional campaign, not the additional campaign modes, with the additional non-campaign modes such as Mercenaries, Onslaught, Siege. A lot of people got into them, and I really got into Onslaught, and it was fun as hell. I would still love to play, if I could find matches of it, I'd still love to play that to this day. It left such a good impression on me. So you've got the really highs there, and then you got what I'm about to get to when I turn on this video. Areas of the game where they just can't get out of their own way. And it's just kind of like they're tripping over their own feet here. Here's a small segment. This is all pertaining to the damage system. Look at the health bar. This campaign tries to be a little more like Call of Duty than Resident Evil. Everyone was trying to... See how I got knocked down twice? Each time you lose a segment on... I don't know if you can see my mouse, but if you can't, look over on the right, lower right-hand side. You'll see two health bar segments missing. I'll back that up 10 seconds. I'm about to lose a health segment. Watch what happens. As you can see, this you fall on your ass. You're going to fall on your ass a lot, and it's very disorienting. Let me see if you take damage while you're down there. Pain tries to be a little more like Call of Duty. Oh, it seems you had some sort of a brief invulnerability window, but every time you lose a health bar, and that happens a lot. I'm pointing at my TV, it's right in front of me. Especially, they've got snipers all through this game. You take a round from one of them, it's instant down. I mean, you're right on your ass, and in some areas, especially in the Chinese levels, the gunfire is such high volume, and it's so constant, you just get knocked on your ass constantly. It is so irritating. It's just like, what were you thinking? Like I said already, did they just put the junior team on this game? I mean, it's a big Resident Evil title. It's one of the main entries in the franchise, and what were they thinking? This is a horrible element to gameplay. I'm going to see if I could find an example of my second biggest pet peeve with this. Might find a brief bit of it here when I'm walking through these tunnels. Tell the goodies before I actually start shooting lead around. From Germany. I probably shouldn't waste all these 40 millimeters. Okay, I'm on the ground now. That's why I hate the China level in this game so bad. Everything's so cramped, it's like you're in a freaking mousetrap, man. This personally made me a little sick to my stomach. And that's not something that happens a lot with me in games. I mean, I know people that say they can't play first-person shooter games because it makes them... I don't really know what the word for it is, but it makes them feel like sick in the stomach. That happened to me with this just because of where they put the camera angle with the tight spaces. This wasn't what I was going for, but this is good to bring up. It's kind of like a very claustrophobic feel, especially like I mentioned in the video, the China levels, because they are so cramped and so compact, and it's a over-the-shoulder camera. It would have been fine in first person, but this is not first person. Let me bring up Sherry's campaign here. Or I should say Jake, it's actually his. Let me find... They whip the camera angle around on you a lot, and I know one specific area where it just gets you killed constantly. Okay, about to get into it here. I didn't move the camera, that was them. They constantly change the camera every time they want you to see something. It doesn't matter if you actually, I mean, if you want to look at it or not. They will move your camera so you... This is an area which, if you're playing co-op, when you go to reorient yourself, you have a hard time struggling to find your target. You'll go past it, you'll go right back to it, but they keep constantly jarring the camera around. And in areas like this where you have minigame after minigame after minigame after minigame, and you're trying to get through them within a very short period of time, because if you don't, you get killed. It's very cheap. Someone can be quite a pain in the ass.
Breaking through. Hurry, Jake.
They didn't win my camera around that time. I about shit myself when that happened, because that is certainly an exception, not the rule. Yep. See there, I tried to reorient myself, but they changed the camera angle on you right there and make it a little difficult to get over here in time. Now, where that comes to be a pain in the ass is I said this game's best played in co-op. It resets both your camera angles, so if you and your partner are both fighting over the same target and you can push each other out of your, each other's way, you can't just walk through the other person's avatar. This is kind of like walking around a wall. You can push them out of the way. Unless one of you hits that button, then you don't have a real good grip on where you're at. It can become a real pain in the ass in this game. I don't know why they just... I could see it if they were like junior developers. I keep going back to that, and I think it's completely appropriate. Higher level developers know not to lock people's camera angles like that. It's disorienting, it jars the player, and it's just... Even though you want the player to see it, you don't want to force them to look in any certain direction. You want them to see it, and if they see it, be like, oh yeah, but... It's a very poor way to explain what's going on through the game. I mean, the best way I could think of to point stuff out the players that you want them to see is do what like Gears of War did, where it's certain contextual moments within the game, you could hit a certain button and the camera will just automatically go to it, so you'll see it, but it's not moving your camera on purpose automatically. And trying to think of if I have anything else to cover with this. Replayability. At the end of each level, you go to... I don't have it in this one. Okay. Naries, no limit. Okay. I'm not going to search around for it that much longer. If I don't find it, I don't find it. Okay, I don't see it. But at the end of each level, there's... And you can do this during the main menu. You don't have to do it at the end of any particular level, but you will get skill points throughout the game. And with these points, they kind of swapped out the old system from Resident Evil 4 and 5, where you upgrade your points manually by collecting things worth the in-game currency. In this, the in-game currency is skill points. You collect that from defeating enemies, completing challenges in the additional game modes. And they give you different skills that you can use in the game that increases firearm power, melee attacks. They got a whole bunch of different skills, and it's different for both a single-player campaign, whether or not you're playing co-op or not, and it's different for the additional modes like Mercenaries. This changes things up a bit because upgrading my weapons in the older games like 4 and 5, and they got back to this with 7 and 8, that was always one of my favorite things. This new system they instituted within this game and this game only was not very good. I mean, I was kind of average on it at the time, but now I simply just do not like the system. So, I think that's the last thing I have to add to this. So in my opinion, with all the highs in the game, in which it is very fun to play co-op with someone, it's also got a lot of negative things with it, so I would have to place it fairly in the average, going more towards the bad but since I only do 5 tiers of ratings, I would place it in the average overall. But if you're playing through this solo, or you can't find anyone to play with, this could definitely fall within the bad range. But it's done well enough so that it stays out of the terrible territory. And that's it. Resident Evil 6, how bad is it? It's not that bad, but it's not that good. It's average. It was a mediocre attempt at a Resident Evil game that had a lot of original ideas behind it that it failed to live up to.